We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
Hello and welcome to Liberty Nation Radio, heard coast to coast on the Radio America Network. I'm your host, Mark Angelides. On today's special edition, we talk inauguration, Trump's plans for the future, what's with the energy emergency, and why the cartels are shaking in their boots on today's show. Welcome to Liberty Nation Radio, heard coast to coast on the Radio America Network. I'm your host, Mark Angelides. Today, we're very fortunate to be joined by a longtime host of this here radio show and Liberty Nation's senior political analyst, Mr. Tim Donald, to discuss the inaugural speech and what it means going forward into 2025. Tim, thanks for being here.
Hello, Mark. Good to be here.
So, first things first, let's get your overall impressions of Trump's first few days in office.
Well, I think it started with the inaugural speech, which was, as many have observed, more like a State of the Union speech, where he laid out a very clear agenda. He chose not to go with the usual soaring rhetoric about the Statue of Liberty and our earned freedoms and the flag and all this stuff, because he sent the message that he wants to get down to business immediately. And no president has ever done as much in his first couple of days as this president. In fact, you and I know from having covered the entire first Trump term and then the Biden term that the comparative levels of exhaustion were dramatically different.
Yeah.
In the Trump term, you could, and it's going to be this way again, you can hardly keep up, where we have to, as journalists, choose not so much what we're going to cover, but what we're not going to cover, because we can't possibly really stay on top of every single initiative every day. And, he's, once again broke precedent. I've never seen an inaugural speech that was so down to business and not the soaring rhetoric and the promises of unity and all these things. It's evidenced by his, 200 executive orders. It's really more than that, because one of the executive orders he signed just eliminated 78 Biden executive orders with a stroke of a pen. So,
he's efficiency in action already.
Let me tell you something. If Joe Biden had held a press conference or made an announcement like Trump did on his second day about a $500 billion investment in artificial intelligence, that would dominate the headlines for probably the remainder of his term. And it wouldn't just be because they were trying to make Biden look good. It would be because it's of almost metaphysical significance.
Yeah. The
Possibilities of this investment as laid out by Larry Ellison of Oracle, that it could basically promises to detect cancers before they take hold and develop custom vaccines for individuals based on what their vulnerabilities are. I mean, this is earth-shaking stuff, Mark, but it's being overshadowed in many senses by the fact that Trump is doing so much in so many areas and so many places that it's almost hard to keep track. I mean, he's already answered more questions in his first 2 days than Biden probably did in his last 2 years, or arguably longer.
There was really fascinating part, and I know that you and I both watched pretty much the events of the entire day, but when he was signing executive orders with the press in the room and then stopping through each order to answer the questions as things went on, and my initial thought was, wow, this guy's really multitasking. He's doing the executive orders, he's checking what they are, which let's say believable reports that Joe Biden wasn't quite aware of what he was signing were coming out as well. But he was signing these things, and he was dealing with questions on a range of topics relative to the executive orders that he was signing at that time. And initially, I was blown away. I was like, wow, that's really good that he's managing these topics. But then I thought, well, maybe I've just been conditioned by 4 years of Joe Biden to think that that's something special. And really, that should be a skill that any commander-in-chief has, is to be able to sign his names to things and answer questions. We never saw that with Joe Biden, not even for
I don't think we even saw anything nearly as spontaneous. and free-flowing from any of the presidents in our lifetime. I mean, you go back to Bush, Obama, Clinton, they would answer questions, but it was in a much more controlled situation. And it was also useful. I mean, here it is. They're announcing, as I said, an earth-shaking $500 billion, that's $500 billion investment from 3 tech magnates joining forces instead of being competitors to create AI to a degree that we've never seen before. And then you realize some things never change. When they were asking questions, and one of the first questions was from some left-wing reporter, I don't know who it was, who said, what about the violent criminals from January 6th? Your vice president said that if you committed violence, you shouldn't be pardoned. And he basically looks at him and said, I'm not going to pay attention to people like you. They're horrible people who just snipe. It brings to mind one of the great characterizations of all time, which was from Richard Nixon's vice president, Spiro Agnew, who referred to the media as the nattering nabobs of negativism. And some things never change. Yeah. And the sense that the elite media, which has been brought low in terms of their credibility, in terms of their significance, they've been easily overrun by social media, podcasts, and new media in general. They just want to continue down the path that brought them lower in terms of credibility than ever in our lifetimes.
Yeah, they're actually abdicating the responsibility that they have to the public because the reporter there would have had that question in mind before they even knew what was going to be announced.
Of course,
and decided not to use intelligence, not to be fleet-footed in terms of grasping what was happening and figuring out how to convey what information they're covering best to the audience that they're serving, and instead stick with a question that
it's not hard.
By that point was pointless.
It's not hard. As a journalist, if you see a shocking announcement like this on AI, you could easily say, okay, Mr. President, is this realistic, or do you think it's really more pie in the sky? Now, that's a provocative question that will elicit, a revealing answer. But when you go in with a preset agenda to make him look bad, this is the kind of thing that people rejected in the 2024 election.
Yeah, partisanship and dull-witted. Let's be clear on that.
Very dull-witted. Mindless, even.
We're going to be back with Tim discussing what's happening coming through for 2025 after this short break. Don't go anywhere.
We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.